book. It's incredible.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. So how are things in Madrid? You're in Madrid now?
Yes, I'm in Madrid.
Okay,
Here.
guys, sorry, we are live. So, greeting everybody. Welcome to the next chapter of Design in the Future. That is today talking about public building, public spaces, or building for public use, as we already said before between us. I would like to introduce you the guest of our today presentation, starting from Martha Thorn, is Executive Director of the Pritzker Prize, that's the Nobel of Architecture, I think everybody knows, and also Dean of the School of Architecture and Design in Madrid. Hi, Martha, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, thank you.
Then I will introduce David Gatton, who is president of a very well-known and established lighting design practice in the States, near Washington, D.C., called the CM Kling and Associates, and also past president of the IALD Association. Hi, David.
Hi, Janina. How are you?
Good morning to you.
Thank you.
And then we have Kim Nielsen, who is founder of 3XN Architects. Good morning to you, Kim.
Afternoon, thank you.
Okay, so let's start just to break the ice. I would like to, and I will, as a gentleman, we will start with Martha, of course. I would like to just break the ice and ask you a very quick question. Can you name one public building around the world that represent, in your opinion, what a public building should be about?
Yes, thank you for that question, and thank you for giving it to us a little ahead of time, because it's not so easy. So I would have to say Seattle Public Library. And the reason I say this building is for several reasons. One, it becomes a place in the city where anybody can go. It's open to all sectors of the population, and it has proven that it embraces many different people from Seattle and also visitors. It's also a building you can go through, so it doesn't make a barrier, but it's permeable. It's a building that functions in a new way. It's not a library just for books, but it's for information sharing and for events. So I think it reflects this optimism of the future. And then it's a building that can become part of the cityscape. It's quite powerful in its architecture, but even more than that, it changes day and night, depending if it's illuminated, it's not, where you are in the city, what the season is. So it also is very interesting visually and functionally.
Okay, I must go. So a little bit far away, Seattle, but I must go. So Kim, what is your favorite, in your opinion?
I actually had Sydney, Seattle Public Library as well as one of the. And I agree with everything Martha said about it. But I have another one that is very different, but does something for not only inside the building but around the building, the Centre Pompidou in Paris, which really activates the whole area, sort of created the whole area around it, and changed it to something different from it was before. Now it's an old building, but still stands out as an extraordinary building. People hate it and people likes it, and that's what I like about it as well. But it is like a big magnet for people, and people. Whenever I'm in Paris, I also go and visit Centre Pompidou, because there's always something happening there. So it does some of the same things in a different way that Seattle Public Library does.
Okay, thank you. It's your turn, David. I hope you don't say the Seattle.
No, I did have a library on my list, but a different one. I'm going to cheat a little bit, and bringing it close to home, I thought about the National Mall in Washington, D.C., which is our collection of a number of public buildings, mostly museums, and how they interact with each other. You have this wonderful open space, but really free museums where anybody from the public can go in and out of. You don't have to pay your 30 euros and spend the entire day at the museum. You can pop in to see one beautiful piece of art and experience it and move on. I think that circulation and flow of that complex is really what I think about when I.
This reminds me actually of what is one of my favorite, which is basically the Berlin Island of Museum, which is also a very, very interesting place where you can see many different architectural building, museum, culture. That's also one of my favorite place. Okay, but let's go forward. I should be the moderator, but I try also to be part of this talk. So I will ask Kim. A public building. We mean with public building any structure that is owned or leased and principally used by a governmental agency for public use. What is different for a design to work for the public and the private sector? And a question that I'm sure that a lot of people, a lot of our audience, from our audience would like to hear. Do budget play a more important role in the public building versus a private one?
It's the same role, I think. Very often it plays a bigger role, but it plays the same role. You have an obligation to the public, to the public to be within a budget or whatever. So I think whenever we're doing public buildings like the fish market we're doing in Sydney right now, it has been a lot about budget as well. But I think private investors, they think about the outcome of the building. The public, they think about what can this building here do for the people in the city. So it's two sides of the same thing, actually, I think. There's not a big difference in working for the public and for the private as we see it, actually.
Okay, I was not expecting this. So do the other guests think the same way or in a different way? Marta, what is your opinion about it?
I think it's unfortunate that many times in cities, we are seeing a big difference between public buildings and private buildings. But we have to remember that public buildings are of many types. It could be a health clinic, it could be a school, it could be a small park. So I think public expenditure always has in mind as its first goal serving the public in some way through services or facilities. And I don't think that necessarily the budgets are higher. It depends on the municipality and it depends on the function. I think the difficulty with private buildings, and many of our cities are made in the majority by private clients, it's the part of the private sector that sees buildings as products for return on their investment. So it's not always this focused goal of a service or a facility. It has that, of course, but it also has to be justified in terms of profits or income. And I think there is a misnomer that good architects cost more than not so good architects, or good buildings have to cost a lot more than not good buildings. I think this is a mistake on the private side, and I wouldn't put all the blame on the clients. I would also say that money is generally conservative, and if we look at banks and the institutions that lend money to private clients, sometimes they're a filter, or they're an obstacle for really doing something special, something that really will build the community. So I look to cities where they have enlightened clients, where the private sector sees it as one of its very important goals, that of service to the community.
Okay, thank you very much. And David, from your perspective, of course, as a lighting designer, do you see a difference in working for the public versus the private sector?
I think from the lighting design approach, it's still the same principles and core values and design technique and process. What I find is different about it deals a lot with, in private sector, you often have a single person or a small group of people you're communicating with, right? So they have a perhaps a greater sense of value in parts of the design, where public sector there's a broader coalition or decision maker process. It also seems that those buildings are unfortunately more susceptible to sort of the worst predatory models of lighting distribution. So it's the most susceptible to substitutions, to value engineering specific to lighting, because it can be such a confusing process. And if you don't have a lot of buy-in to the design, it starts to become a budget conversation. And it's not.
Do you think that this
something for the same price or not? It's that it's being portrayed differently by someone looking to profit.
But do you think that this referring to lighting has to do with the not enough education of the investor, being a private or a public one, towards lighting, or do you see this as a different?
I think it's two-part. One is the education on the performance, the value, the overall story of the lighting design, and how in a private scenario it's easier to embrace that with a smaller group of decision makers. But two, it's much easier in a private development or a private building for somebody to make a decision that isn't based on the lowest cost model.
Okay.
Can I add?
Yeah, sure.
That's something, because I only answered the part about the economy actually, and there I don't see the big difference. The public clients look just as much, and maybe even more on the economy of a building than private clients do. But it has to do, when you talk about ambition, and that's, I think, what Martha was talking a little bit more about. The ambitions can be different, and I think the ambitions are the most important things. And there, of course, we see more often ambitions from public clients, if they're doing a concert hall, or if they're doing a museum or whatever, then they have great ambitions about that. Then if you have a private client that want to build a residential building or whatever, there's a big difference in that. So it's about the level of ambitions that can be a difference in. The economy is, we have to follow the budgets just as much, and the budgets are not necessarily high when it's public. That was what I was talking about in the beginning.
Okay, yes, thank you. Martha, when designing a building, the most important factor is the intended use of the building rather than its appearance. It's a statement I was reading the other day. Do you agree with this quote, or do you think that public building needs to define the image of the city and be an example in terms of construction sustainability? What is your opinion about this?
Yeah, this again is one of those questions that I wish I had a very clear answer, and I don't, because I think we can see many examples. I think that all buildings can represent the ambitions, as Kim mentioned. They can represent something more than their function. And this could be private buildings, corporate headquarters, of course. In the past, corporate headquarters wanted to show their philosophy or their strength or their values in a building. And I think that public buildings can also do that. I mean, how many of us know that we open a building, or the politicians cut the ribbon just before the elections to show that they've been so so responsive to the community by building these buildings. So I think it depends on the type of building, it depends on the moment, and it depends on the place. I think if I had to say what I wish for, I would say that I would wish that the public sector would be the best client to understand the mission of the building in all its facets, not just the function, but its ability to build community, its ability to be part of the collective memory, to create somehow a part of the personality of a city. I think it should represent the openness of buildings to the community, because after all, it's our money that's paying for it. And then it should be the highest example for things like sustainability, for accessibility, universal access to the building, and all of those goals that we say are important, but sometimes are either value engineered out or reduced, or are not seen as fundamental in a building. So I really think that the client has an important role to play. And I would hope that the public sector would be an even better client than the private sector.
Right. Thank you so much. Kim, what is your opinion about this? I always dreamt of asking this kind of question to a very high-level architect like you. So,
well, I would say of the buildings we are doing right now, I'm just thinking about it, the public buildings are maybe half of it or something like that. And the clients we are dealing with here have high expectations and ambitions with the buildings. We still have the economy. We have to think about that. But I think they are more open and listening more because they really want the value for the money there, and they really want something that can give something back to this society, like the fish market we're doing in Sydney. There is a public building actually, even that is private. People that are in the building. There we've got nearly everything in that we had from the competition. It was a competition, and the client have even been more ambitious after the competition regarding sustainability and stuff like that. So you can see that with private clients as well, of course. I think it's so hard to generalize, but I must say, of the building mass we are doing, the public clients are more tending towards having ambitions and wanting to make the state of the art, whatever is up right now in the buildings.
So not only a statement of the building, but the function of the same and its value in construction sustainability, of course.
Everything comes together, yeah.
David, what is your opinion about this?
Well, I think perhaps in the United States, in the public scope, they maybe misread Louis Sullivan and have gone a little too far into the form follows function kind of statement. And it probably needs to recalibrate, because in my opinion, I think form can inspire function in a lot of ways, that the beauty of the building can help to sustain that building, make it a place where the public wants to go and embrace, and that brings the overall building and its use up and makes it more sustainable because it is getting more and higher use over time. So I think that I think like a lot of these conversations, it's a balance, and find the clients that have the ambition and the want to create these beautiful civic moments, and those are great. Perhaps we're not seeing enough of them.
We should be seeing more. Huh? So, Matt, sorry.
To say, but it depends what the civic moment is. And I would say, for example, transportation infrastructure, train stations, things like that, subways. I think those would be great moments for public investment to inspire, to encourage people to use it, and also to say how that is important for society. I would be more uncomfortable if it were an administrative building for City Hall. All of a sudden, if we were building these huge office buildings to house civil servants, or if we were trying to express the power of government through a building. I think it's maybe it's balanced, David, as you said, but I think it's also the attitude of, is it the public building of the people, or is it of the government? Mm-hmm. And clearly, I personally believe it's of the people, and it has to be very respectful, not only of the money that's invested, but of the message that it gives to the people.
Of course, there is a user, and the user are the people. So I think you're saying something very, very, very important. As Marta, as a dean of the School of Architecture in Madrid, do you notice a difference in the opinion about our future public building with a different spirit, maybe in the way the next generation of architect and designer will be approaching public buildings or architecture in general? So.
Yeah, I think architecture in general. And let me just clarify that I'm dean at IE School of Architecture and Design.
Okay.
We're a private school and we're international. So I can't reflect what maybe Madrid students would think, because our students come from all over the world. What I do see in terms of the work of the students maybe would be two things. One is the idea of flexibility is much more built into the projects that they undertake. We don't usually prescribe to them, do a library on this corner, do this or do that. We usually present a challenge, and then they have to define the facility that they will design. And I see more hybrid facilities, less traditional models. And I think this has to do with the rapid change that they're experiencing in technology. Clearly, COVID is top of mind of how they've had to adjust for the new situation. So I would say one thing about our students is more flexibility in the buildings, more open-endedness, leaving room for different types of behavior. And the other thing that I see is the understanding of sustainability comes in many different ways, whether it's a building that they're retrofitting or trying to adapt an old building to new uses, or if they're proposing a new idea, a new building in one of their studio projects. Sustainability is not something that they add at the end, but it's intrinsic in the way they approach it. So those two things are very positive to me, and I'm of course very, very hopeful, as all architects are, but I'm especially hopeful when it comes to this next generation of students.
Fantastic. So let's hope to see very, very nice new projects coming in the future from your enlightened students. And Kim, I have a question for you about the health, which is obviously a big topic now. How do you see the influence of the way the building is designed and on architecture? How do you see technology playing a role in your projects?
It definitely right now it plays a big role, because right now we're in the middle, or hopefully at the end of the pandemic. So all private clients are thinking very much about, for example, in office buildings, how can we deal with this in the future, if it continues or if it comes back and whatever. So there's two ways. There's one thing is about the Brainy buildings. We just opened a building in Berlin, the cube that has a big brain inside, so to speak. So it registers people when they go in via their smartphone, and the people that works in there adjust their living inside of the being inside the building together with his brain, so they get they go to the right place, they get the right environment and everything in the building automatically. And in this pandemic, it's been really useful because you could spread people out, so people didn't cluster up too much. So it has really been functioning. I think this is one of the ways that this is one way forward for a lot of building designs with technology in the future. Another thing is that people are now working, teaching or learning or whatever in different ways. They're sitting at home a lot. We are here in the office, a lot of people here, but there are still some people sitting at home, and there will be in the future. So workspaces or office buildings will be looked in a different way. Maybe there's not so big a need for so many office spaces in a building, but at the same time, there's a need to have a bigger space or have more diversity in spaces inside the office building. So maybe they are the same area in square meters, but they are differently configured in the future. That's what I think. And this is how I think this pandemic has given us a learning lesson. It's been really bad in many ways, but it's also, as every crisis has done, making us think in new ways and innovate in new ways. So of something bad always comes out something good. And I think that's an exciting thing that's happening right now.
Let's hope that something good comes out of it.
Yeah.
And David, let's go a little bit deeper on terms of technology, since we would like to hear your opinion. What is the most notable evolution in the lighting technology that you found in this past year? Don't tell me the LED, because this is quite.
No, the LED is last year.
It would be already, and it's quite obvious. But apart from that, where is the future of the technology of a building from the lighting viewpoint?
I think there's a number of lighting technologies that are ripe and are probably ready to be deployed and have been to a certain extent. For me, the pandemic's probably accelerated the focus on human health with lighting and its application. I think it's been talked about in lighting circles for a number of years, specifically tunable lighting and how it can relate to circadian cycles. And I feel as we move back into in-office work and in building work, that we're going to see a greater focus on bringing a healthier environment and lighting's contribution to that. Part of that is we've all been working from home, where we have much more control over our environment, right? I sit at home and I'm next to a window. I can choose to turn on a table lamp or not. I have a lot of control over my small space, and we don't always get that in a larger commercial building. And I feel that is a trend I think we're going to see grow. And it's not just about circadian or tunable, but dimming. I believe this also falls into some of the germicidal possibilities with lighting. I'm skeptical on some, but I think that is all of that leads to an environment or an ethos about how can technology build a healthier environment for us to engage in.
And why should a public investor employ a lighting designer for his project?
Big questions now for the morning. I think lighting designers are part of a collaborative team. We work with the architects. We work with the.
I'm asking this question because most of the people and most of the audience normally understand why an architect should be involved in a project, but it's still quite, let's say, unknown to the majority of the audience. Why is a lighting designer so important for a project? Okay, today we're talking about public project, but we can also refer to the private
any
one.
project. A lighting designer is going to balance the the art of the lighting and the science and the technology. And we're going to live between the engineers and the architects in a lot of ways to bring the story of the building forward. And it's to be in sync and running with the architectural team, but also to advance the design of the building through the lighting. If it wasn't for lighting, whether natural or electric, you wouldn't see the building. It would the space would literally disappear. From an investment perspective, I think there's a lot of practicality in that a lighting designer will bring the right light to the right space, so there's less waste. It's not just a formulaic process. It's a very...
So we go back again to this subject of sustainability, of course, where a lighting design can play a very important role in energy consumption study for the building, etc., particularly in a large building or public building, where, of course, the consumption will never be small. It becomes essential to study this from a professional perspective.
The right light in the right place, right? Not just, and you need somebody, lighting has gotten so complex that the need for somebody who's really focused on the performance and the needs and the application of it to be part of the overall design team is critical.
Sure. Marta, I assume that in your school you also study about the new technologies, and I'm referring now more in general. I was talking to David specific about lighting, being David a lighting designer, but I imagine that you study with the students are studying also the new technologies. What is the most notable thing that you see is capturing the interest of your students?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, because I think technology in architecture, design, construction, lighting, it's just expanded. It's become a huge field. If we look back, we could say, well, there was a time when we thought parametric design was first it was CAD, then we thought parametric design to help us design buildings. Now everybody's talking about AI is going to be the answer. But if I could recall a conversation I had this morning with a faculty member, lots of the technology that we use in architecture and design, lots of it is an evolution of tools. It's an evolution of doing things better, more efficiently, of improving what architects and designers often do. The revolution comes when things are totally different, when it's not doing the same thing a little bit better, but when it's doing something different. And I think in the field of architecture and design, we're using tools very effectively. I think that what I look forward again to the future is when we're not looking at a two-dimensional screen, when maybe there are virtual spaces that allow us to connect. That would be one major change, I would say, that we don't have to be physically together, but we can have more of an experience of being together. Not that I want it, I prefer to be with people, but that could be
but
one.
Nowadays it's like that. So what we are missing is the experience together. So if we could find a way to make us feel this, loneliness at home or working at home in a more 3D environment where the impression is to be, in a community, that would be fantastic. Eh?
No, it would be great if we could see each other and interpret the body language, the facial expressions, and be a little bit more spontaneous in our communication. I think where we can start, or maybe where we'll see a revolution in technology, and Kim, you probably have more of an idea about this than I do, but I think it would be in the construction industry. When we begin to have factories close to the building site, when we are able to transition from very labor-intensive traditional materials to more to more industrialized materials, but not standardized. Industrialized, where we can still have great variety, and where the assembly on site is more efficient. There's much less waste, and this leads to maybe new forms of architecture, new materials, new ways of understanding the construction process. And that's where I have my eye on that right now, because drones, robots, movable factories, things like that, they're still down the road, but maybe they're on the horizon rather than behind it.
Right. Kim, I see you nodding, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I see that coming for sure. Robot technology on building sites. The only obstacles are very often unions, it's like that. But I think that is really going to be very important in the future, and drones as well. Just think about doing a high rise. Just about cleaning the windows actually is one of the ways that we design high rises, is how to clean the windows. If we didn't have to think about that, there has to come a gondola down, then you can shape whatever shape. If you use drones to clean the facades, just small things like that can change the architecture dramatically, I think. So I think this kind of robot techniques and AI things in the future will change the design and our buildings in the future as well. But also in the architectural offices, I think machine learning will come more and more. We have parametric design. I think most offices actually use it now, and we use it heavily. But in the future, the machine learning will also come in detailing the buildings as well. I still think we will be the hand of the design. I hope so. But machine learning will make it easier for us to do different things, and so we can concentrate on doing the design right. One thing we have to remember that we haven't talked about here is that who do we build for? We build for people, and architecture shapes behavior, as we say here. So it is so important that what we build, and not just how we build it, and all the technologies are only tools to get to the right place at the end.
That changes slightly subject, and of course at the moment governments are under a lot of stress, with this pandemic, because it has a huge impact on their state budget. But do you expect that since, of course, the first thing that many countries have been closing are museum, public spaces, the possibility, to gather together. Do you expect that this will push back development of public building? And if you were to today to convince, our politician to continue to invest in public buildings, what would you say to them?
I would say, when we went into this pandemic, we started firing a lot of people just for precautions, and luckily we could rehire them shortly after, because things has not turned out so badly for our business as we thought it would be. And we are invited more than ever to a lot of public buildings as well around the world. So actually we see that projects are being fast-tracked right now, because governments want employment out there, be sure that people have something to do afterwards. So right now, as the situation is right now, there's no decline as we see it here in my office in the building of public buildings right now. There can be in the future, I don't know. But right now, we are on a moment where all governments are thinking we have to start something here to move on. So the business is going forward, and I think this is not the financial crisis as I see it as it was 10 years ago. It is a crisis, and it is financial, but not as tough as the other one. So I believe that we can get out of this in a hopefully shorter time, and then things will move on again. I think also for governments and for private in our business.
So public investment as a form of employment
for the people.
It is
also, yeah. Infrastructure. You
Because
just
of that, of course.
see what they're talking about in the US, talking about building more infrastructure. So I think that is a big part of what keeps things running as well.
David, is in America is the same?
Yeah, I think very much the same, and I would agree with Kim. Part of the responsibility of a government, in my opinion, during these times is to find to find stimulus to the economy, to the general public, to job creation, and for that, I think public buildings are seeing more momentum right now. If you kind of take a little cross section of the United States, hospitality is barely doing anything. There are some private hospitality projects that are proceeding, but most of the large ones aren't investing. The very large private companies, the big tech companies and things like that, are investing now because some of the labor is a little bit less expensive. Some of the materials might be a little less expensive because people are trying to get sales. But where you're really seeing investment is in the public sector. And municipalities planning, if not actually putting a shovel in the ground yet on these larger projects.
You're going to right now a change in political asset in your county. Do you think that this will make a change? This will make a change in investment in public building?
I think regardless of your political affiliation, a change in leadership in the United States always stimulates investment, and I think this particular incoming administration is focused on more sustainable architecture and energy policies and infrastructure, and I'm hopeful that they will be able to push further on it, because I think we can't just keep repeating the same thing. We need to push our buildings forward.
But I think a change, it's normally something always very positive, particularly in this moment. I think it can't get worse, so it can only get better.
Yeah.
So,
could I just add hello to this conversation? I think I totally agree with Kim and David about public investment is a way to push the economy forward and to mitigate some of the terrible effects of COVID. I think living in Madrid, and you can hear my American accent, so David, we can talk about politics because I'm fascinated and so optimistic now about the future as you are. But living in Spain, I think this is a time for rethinking public buildings in two senses. One, our hospitals, especially in May, and our public health services went through a very, very difficult time. And it's when we had to turn buildings into clinics and hospitals and places where those infected by COVID could be in lockdown, etc. So I hope that the positive outcome of COVID is a reflection on what do we really need in terms of healthcare and healthcare buildings and services. I think the other thing about COVID that we have to remember, and it's related to public buildings, is that COVID it affects everyone, but it affects us in different ways. And I'm here at my office. We have incredible health and safety measures in place. We have hybrid learning, so you can come on campus if you meet certain health protocols. But there are many people who live in small houses. They cannot work from home. They don't have space. They're caring for children or family members. And so we see that the private sector cannot always adjust for the needs of everyone. I think those of us around the table were very fortunate. So as a result of COVID, I would hope that the public would start to think, if there's another pandemic, if there's a crisis, how can I use my public buildings to minister to those folks who don't have the same ability or the same infrastructure or facilities that many people do. And I hope that this rethinking goes hand in hand with the investment and gearing up the economy. The economy is very important to everybody, for sure. But also, when Kim said, who do we design for? Who is our public? I think it's a good time to reflect on that diversity of sectors, that diversity of groups within our public sphere.
Thank you very much. We are approaching the end of our conversation, so would like to just do a final wrap up and ask the final question to each one of you, starting from Kim. Tell the audience something exciting about your work for the future. What should we expect and we should be looking forward to see from you guys?
Us? Well, it is an exciting time, actually, apart from the pandemic, because there's actually a lot of things coming up here of public buildings, museums. We just won a huge natural history museum here yesterday. We're looking forward to opening in a couple of years our fish market. There's so many things starting to come up here right now, a lot more than I expected. We are now also working on a very interesting high-rise in London. That's not an ordinary high-rise where the things are just stacked up, but where the social spaces are very important. I think the way that clients now are looking at buildings is different than it was a couple of years ago. It's very much about how people interact, apart from this pandemic, of course. But all the spaces where people can interact and do other things and get inspired are very important in also even in office buildings and definitely in educational buildings as well. And as I said, we are working now with new tools, with robot technologies as well. So these are some of the things that we will expand on in the future. Still bearing in mind, I think this is an important thing, is who we are building for. I think we can talk about all the tools and all the technologies. The good thing is that people are thinking more and more, also in public buildings, that they are building for the people that's going to use them in the future. And I think that should be the focus point.
Great. So thank you very much for your contribution. David, what do we expect? What should we expect from you in the future?
I think what's interesting to me, what we're working on a few projects, and we've reached a point where the LED revolution and the sustainability and power discussions of how much power can lighting consume within a building have really fallen away. We're at a very efficient place from the power allowances, the technology for the light sources there. And now we can really have conversations about how do we want to deploy it? What should it be? We're looking at buildings where perhaps the power generation for certain parts of the lighting is not connected to the grid and is solar or wind-based and is only able to be used at a certain level based on how much energy they're able to generate on site. We're looking at a building actually locally here that may try to display how much energy the building is generating through its PV systems out to the public. So there's a real conveyance of data and information inward and outward. So I think this now allows a designer to start to think about it a little bit freer from just how low can we make the lighting energy consumption, because there's a sort of level of ubiquity that we have gotten to.
Great. Thank you very much also for your contribution. I will close this with Marta. Marta, I have a question for you, because when the people started to read about Pritzker, comes out a lot of question. I think that from correct me if I'm wrong, but from 1979, Pritzker Prize, Architectural Prize, is considered the Nobel of architecture. Each year you guys select one architect, and in the past, of course, there have been very, very famous architect who won this Pritzker Award, this Pritzker Prize. Lately, less famous, but still very prominent one. And I'm very curious to know, how do you make this selection for the winner?
Yeah.
Which are the criteria that you are using?
Yeah. Well, Danilo, first of all, I don't make the selection. I work with the jury, but I have no voice, no vote. So the jury makes the selection. But there are two objectives to the prize. One has to do with excellence as expressed through built work that embodies the art of architecture. And the second objective, as seen through this built work, is consistent service to humanity. So these two things, excellence in architecture and service to humanity, are discussed. The meaning of this is discussed every year by the jury. They try to find not only as represented in buildings that are done by a person or people, one part of the equation, but both of them that have a strong message. It's an art, not a science, but in my 15 years that I've been with the prize, I'm always impressed by the integrity and the thoughtfulness of the jury. And it's a challenging time, but let's hope they come to a wonderful decision for the coming year as well.
Thank you very much. I'm sure it will be like that. So I thank everybody for participating today. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, David. Thank you, Kim. And I just remind you that remind the audience that there will be the last chapter of the second series of Design the Future in early December. And it's going to be about designing the future on luxury retail. And so that will be the last chapter for 2020. And then, of course, we'll start again in 2021. So thank you very much for everybody's participation. And